Wandering around the world, I've put myself in a lot of situations where you might imagine I would have to deal with the kind of thuggery that you're imagining. Just exploring by myself, and I think the reason that I haven't had, thank God, haven't had many experiences of run-ins with criminality is because I don't expect that. There's a power to our expectations, and I expect safety throughout the world, uh, because um, I just don't believe in living in fear, and I think the more that you let fear into your sphere, then the more things you have to be fearful of. But the thing that really got me, determined and doing a daily meditation practice was actually the story that my grandmother told me, uh, of an explorer. And this was Admiral Byrd. He was in the U.S. Air Force, and he was flying over the North Pole and ended up flying inside a hole in the North Pole into the inner Earth, right? To the realm of Agartha. That's like Shambhala. It's like at a different frequency of reality. It's like entering into another dimension. And there was this other civilization inside the Earth that his plane was grabbed by a tractor beam, landed in this advanced civilization inside a city, and he met these tall beings, and they showed him around their world inside the Earth. Which, it's not that this ancient island and this ancient civilization sank. It's actually they disappeared to the reality that we're experiencing as a collective, because
Sifu Slim here, folks, and world traveler since summer camp at age 10, sleepovers before that at friends' house. I always loved traveling. I always liked being around other people that were different from my family. And I liked my family, but it was fun for me to travel, experience different families, different cultures, different environments. I remember one of my friends growing up, late 60s, early 70s. He had intercoms in his house, kind of the modern technology where you could talk to people at different places around the house. And they also had the internal vacuum cleaner, central vacuum cleaner, so you could open up the latch and it would suck right away. So you just scare somebody, they'd be sitting there. They weren't on their iPhones at the time because that didn't exist, but they could be standing there talking, and right behind them, you could open that up and go like that. You could get a little scare out of them. So there's my little traveling scenario, which led to my being a traveling man throughout my life and digital nomad since 2017. Over to Keegan, who has a different story of growing up. Were you a kid in the 90s? When were you a kid?
yeah, I was born in '92.
So 90s and early 2000s, you were a kid. So Keegan, tell me how you got to be somewhat of a traveling man and digital nomad, and how that started for you and what age you were.
Well, I mean, it's something that I learned from my parents. My dad has this strategy in life of building a house and living it for a bit, and then moving to another place and doing it again. So we lived various places throughout my childhood. And then 2009, I was a junior in high school, and one of our teachers at Morro Bay High School here in California, he would take groups of kids to Europe every few years. And I begged and begged my parents to let me go on that trip. I was so interested, in the opportunity to learn from other cultures, and so they caved and let me go along, and it was really amazing. We saw Italy and tiny bit of France and England, and yeah, and then the following year I graduated, and my brother and I went straight to China. We went to a Shaolin Kung Fu school in Henan province and studied Kung Fu for 3 months, and then I wandered through China and Thailand and Laos for 3 months. So that was my first big solo adventure, and it's just been crazy adventure after crazy adventure ever since then.
Would you consider yourself, Keegan, a good packer and planner of your trips, or more of a winger, figure things out as I go?
Yeah, I've definitely. Well, I don't know if you know anything about human design. This shed some light on my experience when I found out about it. In human design, I'm known as a splenic generator. So, I'm ruled by the energy of the spleen, meaning I'm very spontaneous, and I'm definitely all these adventures. The majority of them have been flying by the seat of my pants, uh, and that leads to a lot of unplanned misadventures type scenarios, different improvising. You could say a lot of suffering, and from that, a lot from that all that amount of suffering, I've gained wisdom. Because
Oh
wisdom
my
comes from
God.
suffering.
Okay, can we break it down in mathematical terms? I when I've interviewed the opposite sex in my past and on camera and off camera, and I try to talk percentages and I try to rate things like how good are you at knowing the stock market? Are you a six, nine? What are you? So some of the our opposite sex compatriots don't like to do that mathematical number ranking thing that I do. I think it's a very rational brain way to look at certain things. And in terms of suffering, I don't know if I can ask you if you look at 100% of your last 20 some adult years, if there's a percentage of suffering, and if you've had any moments of suffering that were over eights or nines, maybe you could share a little bit about that.
Hmm. Uh, and it's also a moment to moment thing too. Like because I'm feeling different things. Like on one hand, I feel like, oh, this is an experience of suffering, where say I'm hitchhiking and nobody's picking me up. And on the other hand, it's an opportunity to get a different perspective, and I see it in both ways, and it really kind of flips back and forth in the moment. It's like, oh, say, this is 70% suffering right now, 30% I'm having the time of my life, and my brother was into backcountry adventures and rock climbing and stuff, and in his circles they called that type 2 fun. Right? Yeah, type 1 fun is where you're having a good time and it's going according to plan. And type 2 fun is where it's like, this sucks right now. But it turns out into a
Oh,
good story later. But
yeah.
if we look at it chronologically, I would say it's a pretty high percentage where I'm not suffering. It's very subjective to try and answer that question, right?
Well, for you, it's not subjective. You know what your tolerance is at currently, and when you were 10, you know what your tolerance was at age 10. So some people are sensitive. I'm a HSP, highly sensitive personality. 20% of the planetary species are highly sensitive. And so what we do is we take in energy, and a harsh energy, loud energy is hard on us. Soft is not hard on us at all. And we're very empathic people, and we hopefully can lead the people that are the highly productive, maybe more high stress, more A-type people to making better decisions, more sustainable decisions, less harmful decisions, that type of thing. So for me, pain historically as a kid, I was not good with pain, emotional pain, needle pain, etc. But over time, I grew. I said, hey, if I'm going to need, when they put the needle in the back of your hand, for an outpatient procedure, I figured out that if I was afraid, they were going to make more mistakes. So now I press into it just a tad, like a little Zen press into it, and I try to empower them in the meeting when they're getting ready to put the needle in me. I say, you're the professional, I'm in your hands, and I try to give them all the confidence in the world to do what they do without worry. And if I'm worried, it could translate to them being worried. So I learned to overcome that. But inside, I'm still someone who doesn't like pain, emotional or physical.
Yeah, I mean, when I say subjective, I mean like I see it in one way, but anybody who's listening to this may have a totally different a concept about whether that experience would qualify as just suffering, or whether because I'm enjoying the challenge, right? And athletes know, it's a painful growth process, you pushing yourself through, and the runners live for that high. And you know, it, it's been the same way for me as far as wandering, searching for community, looking for opportunities to connect in a world that's so full of disconnected ways of being, um, people siloed and are not able to relate to one another in many ways. And yeah, I mean that is a pain that I feel deeply of that disconnect. And my quest has been to try and build bridges of connection far beyond what many people open their worlds to. Many of us, we're born, we live, and well, we don't fully live because we're not fully expanding into the possibilities. We went to well, I went to Disneyland in my childhood and went through the Small World ride and see all these cultures from around the world singing together. It's a small world after all. Many of us know that song. But is it true for us? Like for me, I'm living it in a true way. I just left majority of my possessions at a friend's apartment in south of Turkey, and now I'm back here in United States, and like I'm spread out here, right, across this small world, and I don't know, I find that many people that I encounter can't conceive of a life like mine, being globally nomadic for so many years.
So I'm going to tap into some of the stuff that I'm doing. So organic cacao powder,
I've used
put it
that.
up in front of my face. And so it's 100% cacao. Good for them to put this in a nice bag that hopefully is not toxic. Send that off to the stores. Allow me to purchase this in the store, and then it's got all the things on the back that say, what it's approved, what organization has approved this type of thing. So you hope all these organizations, I bless them, and I hope they're doing the best they can do given their funds and their requirements and things, the strings that are pulling on them. And then I've also got, because this is not as easy to handle for powder reason. The powder, you can't just take it in your car and open it up and get it in your gullet. It's too, it's too much. It grabs onto things. It's got a friction connectiveness to it. So those molecules want to grab onto whatever they go to, your face. They can go up your nose. You don't want those up your nose. No powder up your nose. And then they've got this one. This is the nibs. What a great name for nibbling, organic cacao nibs. So these are more your rock them, sock them, take them with you to the ball game with your kid. You can have a small handful of these, put them in your gullet. Lots of healing properties in cacao. And I encourage everyone to watch some videos, read some literature on cacao. And then I take my pumpkin bisque, Trader Joe's, uh, creamy soup with pumpkin and fall spices. I'm not advising people to purchase this because we ran the scanner, this application called Yuka, and there's the application on the iPhone, and that's the one that you download free of charge, and then you scan the barcode on the bottom of your product or on the side of your product. The barcode would be here on my soup. You can scan things and find out what the ingredients are and what they rank the ingredients. And this one came back as a 45% out of 100. So it's got some things in there that you don't want. So don't buy the soup, but get jars like this with good tops. And then you can put your drink in there, put your cacao in there, and then you're good to go. Over to Keegan for his thoughts on cacao and what he's currently rocking in his dietary liquid.
I've grown cacao down in Costa Rica, been part efforts to cultivate in a good way in Punta Mona Center for Sustainable Living and Learning on the Caribbean side of Costa Rica. Got to be like basically an Oompa Loompa down there, dancing around, growing the cacao,
Ah,
doing cacao ceremonies. We would make little balls of the freshly fermented cacao. We'd put it in a bag and let it ferment for some time, and then uh, roast it over the stove, which was always fun, and then grind it with the same grinder we'd use for the corn to feed the chickens, and then mix it with some cinnamon, maybe some sweetener, some dates, different things. And it's a beautiful plant. It's a beautiful experience. They have a plant down there that's called Madre de Cacao, which is the cacao likes to grow in the shade, and the madre is a certain plant that is typically growing and shading the cacao. So a symbiotic relationship. I've just finished right before we hopped on this call. I just finished planting this queen palm. You can see right here. And,
wow.
and so yeah, because we met at 11:30 instead of 11:15. I had to jump in the shower. I had time to jump in the shower. Otherwise, you would have seen sweaty, dirty me.
Cacao bean, also known as cocoa or cacao, is the dried and fully fermented seed of the blank. Can you fill in that word for us or not?
Well, we just call it cacao. I mean,
The Theobroma, Theobroma
nice.
cacao. Have you heard that word?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You've heard of that. Okay, so I
Yeah,
only got you on one word.
Theo is God, right? Like
Hmm.
theology. Bromo, I don't know. Sounds like Brahmin.
Well,
That's the food of the gods,
so
right?
Una broma is a joke in Spanish. Una
That's true.
broma, un chiste is also a joke. And then a broom. So I bet you broom and joke have some common history. I don't know that, but I bet they do. Theobroma, the cacao tree from which cocoa solids, a mixture of non-fat substances, and cocoa butter, the fat, can be extracted. Cacao trees are native to the Amazon rainforest. They are the basis of chocolate and Mesoamerican foods. That would be a fun course for you to lead sometime, hopefully in person, but if not on Zoom. Mesoamerican foods, including tejate, an indigenous Mexican drink. Over to Keegan for his GoFundMe needs to run that course and any other thoughts he has on Mesoamerican foods.
Um, well, before I landed in LA last week, I flew TAP Air Portugal for the first time from Lisbon, and before that from Rome, and they actually had some Portuguese lessons available on the transatlantic flight, which was cool. You could on the screen in the seat in front of you, you could have some people teach you some Portuguese, which was interesting. And I also watched a documentary about a man from Florida who went and stayed with the Maya people on the Yucatan and got into their customs because, like, we're told about the Maya as this, ancient indigenous that like mysteriously disappeared, and they're very much still alive. There's people living today in the Yucatan keeping the Maya culture alive, and also south of there in Belize and a little bit north of there as well, and very interesting ancient culture. Definitely recommend that documentary. It's called Beyond the Ruins, and it's like these Mayan people have this sacred relationship with the cacao, with the corn, and with all the wonderful plants and animals that live in the same environment there. So uh, beautiful culture for us to live from. And the reason I flew back from Europe and at the time that I did was to be part of this event that was called Limitless Live, and I was learning from Jim Quick and a host of other speakers that he organized, and that's how to learning how to learn. Right, that's the specialty of Jim Quick, and he has a program called Quick Reading to help you read faster. He's got the perfect name. Uh, but yeah, I mean, oh, I was going to mention something about at that event. I got excited. There's a whole host of speakers, but I connected with one in particular. It was the human calculator. So I had never heard of this guy, and he's just master with numbers. And as many of us know, the Mayan people are also historically mathematical, you know, sources of inspiration, right? They did a lot of research and had advanced systems of counting time, mathematics. We have the Mayan calendar and this human calculator guy. Uh, he's basically supporting the Mayan calendar. He has his own version. He's saying, why do we have this Gregorian calendar? Uh, and December is the 12th month, and it's in DEC, it means the 10th. So why is we have the 10th month as the 12th month? September, sept means seven, but it's the ninth month. Why it's all mixed up. Some months are 30 days, some are 31, some are 29. We got 28, and the Mayans had this calendar that was 13 cycles of 28 days, and then makes 364. And then they have the day out of time, which is at the end of July, and they had their new year at the end of July because that's when the star Sirius rises just before the sun. Uh, but now we have the human calculator making a movement to use a similar calendar system. He's keeping his new year around on the 1st of January, uh, but using the same 13 cycles of 28 days to get us all a lot more regular. And that way, what day of the week is what date, because it would stay the same each year. Imagine that and how much
Yeah,
more efficient we could be.
that's a great idea. I think we should make that move. I don't know what he thinks about using a metric system. Do you think that would be another thing that the world uses? Everyone uses the metric system and everyone uses the Mayan calendar. What do you think?
It could happen. It could help us a lot. It's just we get deeply entrenched in our habits, and then not realizing there's that life could be that much simpler, right? Um,
So the cacao tree first domesticated at least 5,300 years ago by the Mayo Pinchipe culture in South America before it was introduced in Mesoamerica. The cow was consumed by pre-Hispanic cultures and spiritual ceremonies, and its beans were common currency in Mesoamerica. The cacao tree grows in a limited geographical zone. Today, West Africa produces nearly 81% of the world's crop. The three varieties are Forastero, of course, the forest, probably grown in the shade. Criollo, which means Creole. That's a Criollo, no, double L in Spanish would be Criollo, Creole in French, and Trinitario, Trinitario, with Forastero being the most widely used. So you were right on the growing it in the shade. And the biggest problem with coffee in the industrial zone, I was going to write a book circa 2011 called Beaned, as in getting a ball or rock hit into your head, getting beaned by a ball. Beaned, the untold story of the coffee trade. And it would show the dark side, just like we showed the dark side of the animal raising industrial, the dark side of food growing in the industrial cycle, the dark side of working in industry, like Upton Sinclair's The Jungle and the meat packing plants in the Illinois and Chicago, Illinois, in that area in the at the turn of the century in the early 20th century. This would be the story of the coffee bean, which is one of the most widely consumed drinks in the world. Milk, coffee, tea to the lesser degree, and then beer. So they're all in the top five. But coffee has a really dark side, and one of them is growing it without shade. It's supposed to be grown slowly in the shade and done, and it would have less bitter taste, less problematic things for a digestive system if you do it that way. But since it's such a big industrial thing, they grow it in the open format. They use industrial processes, and then they also the shipping is the big problem. So it's already growing mold while it's a tree. On the tree, the bean's already growing mold, and then they harvest that and they put it in storage areas. That's growing more mold. Rats are in there too. Then they put it in the hulls of ships, which is very moist. They take a moldicide, a fungicide, and they spray it with a big fan sprayer over everything, either bags or bins or whatever it's in, try to keep the fungus down. And then they get it to somewhere like Holland or wherever there's a port where they can store it before they ship it out to Starbucks and all the companies who use it. And it's getting mold there as well. So mold is one of the big problems. Growing it too quickly in the sun is a big problem. And then the poor treatment of all the people in that web of growing to harvesting to shipping it, storing it, all this thing. A lot of low paid people, and it's sort of a negative, I think, coffee. Now, there are places that are doing it more of a boutique farm, smaller farm, organic methods, shipping it properly, um, and shipping it independently from the final person to the end user, like the wine, some of the wine businesses and other businesses do it. So there are things that have crept in that are doing it properly, but by and large, the coffee trade is very dark, as is the olive oil trade, as is anything else I know that's done with the large manufacturing methodology. Over to Keegan for his thoughts on some of this.
yeah, I mean it's not a machine. I mean this world is it's a beautiful host of flowers, right? Plants and animals. We all bloom and blossom in our own way, and when you mechanize us try to fit us into uh, something that we weren't that we haven't been evolving naturally to do, uh, then you have consequences. Right? Interesting. I never heard about that being 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 hit by something, right? Or
I got
throwing
beamed
it.
in the
That's a
head.
new word.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
uh, there's a pejorative word for people who pick crops used against the Latinos. I've heard it in California called beaners, people that pick
I've been a beaner
beans.
before.
You've been a beaner, yeah.
Well,
Uh,
picking beans.
Picking beans, yeah.
Mm.
And then the other thing is, why didn't I write that book? So I'll interview myself. Sifu, why didn't you write that book? Well, interestingly enough, in 2011, I did an internet search and I looked for is to see if someone had already done that. I think the most ridiculous thing that I've seen in writing and discovery is picking a topic that someone's already done a very good job and spending 4 years of digging in and writing a very similar book. Like, let's say it's 80% the same book with the same statistics, the same stories, general stories, as the other person who already wrote that book. What's the purpose in that? But if someone had a name like Michael Pollan, right? So his agent could come to him, say, "Hey, there's a book that's out there written by Sifu, me, who didn't have an industrial publishing end behind him, but you do. You can write a similar book to Sifu, who wrote this already, and you could say this, and we could help you crank that out with AI and get that done." Michael Pollan, who I think is a good person, I've met him in here in Santa Barbara at one of his speaking events. Great guy, hard worker, teacher at Berkeley. And if he it would be nice if he said no, Sifu's already written that book. Why don't you approach him and see if you can help him market his book and get it out there because he already did the work. But there are plenty of people, authors in the business, famous people in the business, whose agent comes to them and says, "Hey, you're under contract to produce a book every 2 years or whatever the contract says. We're going to run with this one. We're going to put your name on it and take it or leave it. And if you leave us, we'll cut you off." I mean, that happens. That's how, unfortunately, big business in Hollywood and book deals are done. And I just listened to a big show on the matrix of the business world just last week, including character assassination. If you don't go along with what the matrix says, pretty dark stuff. And me just having said this on YouTube, there's a bot picking that up, saying Matrix, Sifu, and putting me in some sort of a list and probably telling YouTube to de-platform me or to promote me less. It's a scary thing, but I'm just a real person doing a real job and living life honestly with integrity and endeavoring to do the right thing by others. That's my goal. Over to Keegan for his thoughts on some of this stuff.
Dark roast. Getting roasted by the dark sometimes. Um, but if we have a greater level of familiarity with one another and mutual support, and, building community, uh, then we can overcome those things. And that's what my quest is all about, to build that community, bring that awareness, that we are people. We're here to help one another, and we have the capacity to be a benefit to one another, to all life. And when we realize that nature is inherently collaborative, we can align with that and transcend all this scarcity mindset and realize abundance for everybody. Um, just another note on the coffee, something that we can each do with our coffee grinds. If you like mushrooms, they're a great substrate. And I was doing this when I volunteered at the Resonance Science Foundation on Kauai in 2016. We had a little bucket and we'd throw our coffee grounds in there, and then we would inoculate that with spores from the oyster mushrooms, and then we would have oyster mushrooms growing out of the sides of the bucket. Uh, Beautiful little home culture, and growing delicious mushrooms using the coffee twice. Yeah.
Great organic fertilizer, right? And a mineral provider. Is that the main thing it provides? Minerals, or what else does it provide?
Well, I mean, it's just a substrate right in there that works nicely. There's people concerned that like, oh, the coffee grounds are too acidic for us to be adding to our compost. But really, it turns out that's not the case because most of the acid has gone into your cup of coffee, which is why um, I mix my coffee with chicory root, which has the opposite effect. So it's counteracting the acidity. Um, and there's other ways you can do that as well if you don't like the chicory root, but I find it delicious.
Why are coffee grounds good compost? Because they're nutrient rich, microbe friendly, and structurally useful when used correctly. Contain nitrogen, a key nutrient that fuels plant growth, potassium, phosphorus, magnesium, and copper. So there's the minerals I was hoping to find more about.
Mm.
Uh, Nitrogen helps balance high carbon materials like leaves or cardboard. Grounds are excellent food source for beneficial bacteria and fungi. Active microbes speed up compost breakdown and improve soil health. Who doesn't want that? Fine texture helps fill gaps between coarse materials. Great. When mixed well, they improve moisture retention without making compost soggy. Are near neutral pH. Used coffee grounds are near neutral pH. Most of the acidity ends up in the brewed coffee, not the grounds. Hallelujah on that. So,
Laughing about that because that's what I was saying. It's like you're worried about it being too acidic. Or I had this conversation with somebody like, "Oh, it's going to make our compost too acidic," but it's like, no, you're making your body acidic by drinking most of the acid from the coffee. Uh, which is why I'm saying it's good to have something that is counteracting that and bringing the pH balance.
so that's when you hit that guy. He's like in his meditative mode, doing a happy baby or something with you and yoga, and you wait and you have your iPhone all geared up for the chat GPT answer. And then you just, when he turns over to like give you that namaste, you go, hey, buddy, check this out. You're way off on the acidity, right? And you just blast him with modern technology right there. And if he doesn't agree with you, then you throw some jujitsu on him. How do you like that?
I don't know, Sifu.
Just a playful, I'm just having a little absurdity to take the namaste moment with somebody who is completely incorrect and making him eat his words, because eating someone's words is fun. I use it in a fun way, not in a dominating way, because I need that too. Because sometimes my high horse is wrong, and I need somebody to correct that. So I think silliness. I'm going to go to Hicks and Gracie. So you know who Hicks and Gracie is?
I don't. I
So
know the
Hicks,
Gracie family from Jiu-Jitsu.
yeah. So Hicks and Gracie is what you might call the modern Bruce Lee. I'm 63. He's 65 or 6 right now, and he took martial arts to a new level. Um, He's someone who learned breathing, so he had everything else going for him. And then he said, "What else am I going to do to advance this art?" There's a lot of asphyxiation in jujitsu, and there's a lot of being held where you can't breathe, right? And he's a guy out of the Gracie family. He's not the largest person, but he's the one who got the most Tarzan-like physique for a guy who's under 6 foot. He's about 5'10" and a half, 5'11", and he really looks like a Tarzan, and his face is very attractive. He looks like kind of like a male lion. So when he doesn't smile, he's got those sleepy, deep eyes of power, energy, and pensiveness. He's got it all, like a lion. But then when he smiles, he can go right into this friendly, welcoming guy. Very interesting cat. Speaking of 1960s lingo, he's a cool cat, right? An interesting cat. That's the 1950s and 60s lingo. But he took it to a whole new level. And the greatest story I've heard him share, and there are thousands of them, thousands of these stories, all from him, because he kept trying different things: diet, meditation, yoga, modern training, ancient training, waterfall cold treatments. He did it all. But one thing he did, trying to prepare himself for asphyxiation, one of his brothers or cousins was with him, or friends, I can't remember which. And he said, "Roll me up in a rug." And once you're in a rug like this, you're stuck. And if the rug goes high enough over your head, the breathing becomes an issue. And he knew that was something he had to overcome because if you can keep your heart rate down and your breathing down, and even though your ribs are constricted and you can't get the full breath or even much of a breath, there's a way to do it. And he knew that there was a way to do it. So he said, let this rug be my boa constrictor, and they rolled him up on the rug, and he was in there, and he went into this deep trance type thing, and I'm not sure how long he was in there, but he figured out what to do with his mind, body, and spirit while in that rug, and it served him well in life and in his competitions and in his training of others, his training sessions. Most of life isn't competitive jujitsu. Most of it's training and life, normal life. And so he advanced the whole thing, kind of like Bruce Lee did and many other great senseis and sifus have done. But he also tested it in live competitions at 178 to 182 pounds with people that weighed all the way up to 260 and in his gym 300 pounds or whatever. And he never lost. He lost one competition in judo, which was a point-based thing, but never submitted, as far as I know, in normal training, like when they're both going at it fair fight type of thing. I don't know if he was submitted very much, if at all. Just an incredible guy. Over to Keegan for some of his thoughts on taking things to the next level.
Mm. I didn't go very far in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu myself, but my brother did, and I got to see, the level that they have in that, like the culture that they create with each other, just the amount of love that they share with their, you, people have such respect for each other training together. And it's really a beautiful thing to see that. And it comes back to what we were talking about earlier about this challenges and the suffering. You get a greater appreciation for the experiences of life because they challenge you. And when it comes to this extreme level, like you're talking about, what Hickson was
Nixon.
doing. Yeah. Uh, that like that's you're you're integrating like my movement, my initiative that I'm sharing with the world is called integrate fullness, which is about bringing more of who we truly are into expression here and now. And this is exactly the kind of way, because when you push yourself to that level, you're integrating more fullness, and you get a greater appreciation, which just helps to bump you up more. The more grateful you are, the more things you have to be grateful for. It's a energetic dynamic that we've seen again and again and again.
So a coaching moment for Keegan, who hasn't done Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Do you have any great physical senseis whom you follow?
I mean, I did start out with my brother. We were actually doing work. We were training at the Bayside Martial Arts in Los Osos, California, and that's a great teacher from the mixed martial arts, where we were learning from influences from Chinese Kempo, and we did Eskrima, and various influences. And they were doing at that time they were doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at the same school there. And so we started doing like we were cleaning up the school in exchange for some lessons in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and my brother kept going with it, and I just stuck with the other stuff. And then we found out about Chinese wushu that was happening at another school, and we went and got involved with that, which led to our adventure into China. Um, so uh, I mean, I still look to Jackie Chan as one of my greatest heroes, for sure. And just not only from the sheer like physical feats that he has done and the creativity of like the choreography, but also the fact that he's the most productive, the most prolific movie producer of all time. So if you haven't seen any of the
Jackie,
Chinese Jackie Chan movies, I
yeah,
highly recommend.
no, Jackie Chan abused his body young in the Chinese theater training where but they put you in a full split sitting, full split this way, and they start you out with a peg situation or a big rock taking you back little by little so you can do this wide split. And they do handstands, headstands, falls. They teach these young acrobat actors all these things. And I think when he was doing it, which would have been in the 50s, he would have been getting beaten with a stick. I don't think they used whips, but they may have. They may have used a whippy stick like a bush branch, but it was a physical uh, penalty. What is the word? Corporal punishment
Hmm.
penalty if you couldn't do it at that time. And then you had all the peer pressure from everyone in your acting troupe to, as some have said, man up in the modern era to make sure you can do that. And it's very similar to what happened in my youth and my father's youth and my grandfather's youth in normal school. In normal school in America, up until the 70s, they had boxing in school and people beating the crap out of each other and uh, very harsh stuff in PE and in sports training. And in the 70s, professional hockey players will talk about the fact that they weren't given water late 60s, early 70s, and also in the college football arena uh, Bear Bryant in University of Alabama. They take these people in Alabama where it was 95% humidity, 95 degrees in the sun, in their August training pre getting to school, and they wouldn't give them any water. And they thought the harsh treatment was good. And this hockey player talks about the trainers and coaches thought they would cramp up if they got water into their system. They were completely wrong. They should have looked at the history of Roman legions and other things. They knew that water was good. It doesn't make you cramp up, but there was a lot of harsh and stupid type training back in the day. And so Jackie Chan had to deal with that as a young person. Bruce Lee had to deal with a fair amount of that as a young person. And it's just the harshness of training. And Hickson Gracie had a huge family and all this competition amongst family, amongst neighboring schools, amongst neighboring kids. And when he grew up, there was a lot of thuggery all over Brazil, all over the world, there was thuggery. And impoverished people those areas were full of thuggery where you're walking down the street and you could get jumped by other people who had nothing better to do than and have an enjoyment of beating the heck out of you. And if you had nothing on you but a yo-yo, taking your yo-yo. I mean, this is how Hickson grew up in the 60s in Brazil. So over to Keegan for some of his thoughts on the harshness of life and Jackie Chan upbringing.
I just finished listening to this audiobook that's called Change Your Brain, Change Your Life. And it's by a doctor who's, looked at upwards of 80,000 brain scans in his career. At the time, that's the number he gives at the time he printed the book. Probably he's got over 100,000 that he's looked at by now, I imagine. And he generally said that kids participating in youth football uh, had brains, uh, you know, um, or just football. It's like, let's say football players in general had brain scans that, on average, had the same amount of damage as somebody that's been addicted to hard drugs. Which is why he does not let his kids play football and does not advise that any parents do either. Because this is the most valuable uh, like thing that we have.
It's the most valuable human commodity is the brain.
Mhm. Yep. And so it's very important that we protect it. Uh, I've wandering around the world, I've put myself in a lot of situations where you might imagine I would have to deal with the kind of thuggery that you're imagining. Just exploring by myself. And I think the reason that I haven't had, thank God, haven't had many experiences of run-ins with criminality is because I don't expect that. There's a power to our expectations, and I expect safety. throughout the world, uh, because um, I just don't believe in living in fear, and I think the more that you let fear into your sphere, then the more things you have to be fearful of, and I mean it's not infallible. Sometimes you do have uh, like recently I was so I drove my car from Montenegro down to Turkey, and I was going to south of Turkey, and I uh, I went through a city called Izmir on the west coast, and I got there pretty late, checked into a hostel, and I went out for dinner, and then I went to a bar and made some friends. Some new friends also visiting Turkey from they were visiting from Catalonia. So they were Spaniards, but they're like, no, we're not Spanish because we're from Catalonia. And one of them was two of them from Catalonia, one from the Basque region. So all of them kind of within Spain, but not patriotic to Spain in that sense. And so we kind of had some good conversation going on. It's getting late into the night, and two younger ones want to go um, into this bar that has local women that are hired to dance there. And it's nothing too racy or anything. It's not like a strip club or anything like that. Um, but one of them gets involved with a conversation with this woman, one of these dancers. And as soon as that happened, the price of the drinks went way up. He's expected to pay for her drink. Apparently, this is a thing in Turkey, and he's getting into having negotiation. I'm not paying attention to because I'm having a conversation with his brother. They're the two Catalonian guys are brothers, and and as it goes on, it turns out they're not agreeing. They're asking him to pay this exorbitant amount for drinks, and because of the fact that he's engaging, talking to this woman who's hired to be there, and they go out of the bar, and because I walked into the bar with them together, I'm part of this drama. And what happened is the waiter says, "You're going to have to pay 1,000 Turkish lira for your beer." And that's probably four times what it should cost. And I said, how about 250 Turkish lira? And he goes and attacks me. Like, he pushes me, and I'm in an inebriated state, and I don't have the judgment that I should have in that moment. I know Jackie Chan had this great couple of movies, the Drunken Master and the Legend of Drunken Master, which are, Legend of Drunken Master is probably my favorite movie. Definitely recommend checking that out. But there is also the element of being inebriated where you don't have as good of judgment. And so I'm starting to scuffle with this guy, the waiter who attacked me. And the next thing I know, my wallet is gone. And two other guys come and they rush me out of the bar, and so they basically used my wallet as a collateral in order to get the Spaniard, this Catalonian, to pay up, because he engaged with the local woman that was hired there. So that's my story of one run in that I did have, a little bit of violence that happened, getting hustled. Unfortunately, they brought my wallet back out. They didn't take anything out of it. It was just used to, to get the other guy to pay. But that's also the reason that I'm taking off. I'm stopping to drink alcohol, for the foreseeable future. And I've done that in the past. I've done it for a year. A few years ago, which was a great experience, and so I'm looking forward to that. But because I just don't like that feeling of not being sharp enough, not being in the moment of present enough to not engage with somebody who attacks you, to not be drawn into a scuffle
Yeah,
and other
yeah.
things that could happen.
No, in the modern era, scuffling is on camera so often, and the risk of getting your teeth knocked out or an eye being blinded or landing on the back of your head, getting cold cocked, getting stabbed. There's just too much going on in the modern era to do the fisticuffs that were more common in Bruce Lee's time, which there would have been more fair fights in Bruce Lee's time and in my youth. And I've studied this. I've studied the sociology and the incidence and the percentages of fair fights in the 20th century versus now. Now is a time, you mentioned living in the fear-based society. We're also in the apathetic society.
Oh,
We're
so
also
much.
in, yeah, the apathy is really expanded since the 80s, I would say. And that's the saddest thing I found in young people is the apathy. Adding on to that, we have the no accountability. So when people are writing their reports with ChatGPT, and then you can just say in one line of ChatGPT, put some mistakes in here so it makes it look like a 10th grade paper. It'll do that in 30 seconds or 8 seconds. You've got that report and you submit that to your teacher. It's not a time where I would want to be a teacher. If I wanted kids to be accountable for their work, I wanted them to make improvement. I wanted them to get something out of the semester. No, I wouldn't want to be in there right now. There are people who are in the zone, who are ready to make the difference, who are ready to overcome those obstacles. I was already there. I did teaching in the 90s and the 2000s, and I moved out of that, and now I'm doing that was public school teaching, right? And now I'm a coach, fitness, wellness, and life coach, author, podcaster, and I intervene in people's lives in public all the time. I intervened in two people's lives just now before our YouTube podcast with people at a cafe. And one, we're going to mutually help each other. And the other person, I helped him because he's in a bad state with neurological things happening right now in his mind, body, and spirit shutting down and PTSD and all these kinds of things. So I don't know how I can help him in the ongoing things that are coming on, but I passed on some stuff and I said I would send him a few doctors I knew about who might be able to test him for his condition. So it's a tricky time about, you know, sticking up for yourself with your words, having a fair debate, if push comes to shove, having a fair fight, which historically was something that two men did. Hopefully, not too many women in the history of the world, but that happened too, a lesser frequency. Unless it was three sisters, that would have happened commonly growing up until they were in their late teens and early 20s. So maybe over to Keegan for some of his thoughts on the history of violence and when violence might be necessary in defending yourself or defending others.
Yeah, I mean, we have the right to self-protect, uh, and and to say no to coercive influences, and so that's when we can justify being violent, but otherwise not, right? My rights end where yours begin. We can't be going around and bullying, and uh, I think I think that as strange as it may seem, that we're kind of being pushed into a more just society, I think. And you mentioned AI. I think that like the presence and availability of this is actually serving to push us out of things that we've been stuck in that we wouldn't move out of. Sort of like how COVID like pushed us uh, into to realizing oh wow, this is the way things are. Like I'm going to be mandated to take an experimental injection, uh, and 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 um, and realizing like the public school system is built right is grandfathered by the Rockefeller family dynasty to create a nation of workers, right? And I don't want he's quoted John Rockefeller's quoted as saying, I don't want a nation of thinkers, I want a nation of workers. And that's what the design that we see carried forward to today in our public school system. And many of us realize that, and yet we keep going because that is the established habits that we have, our customary traditions of sending our kids to these institutions, which are so unhealthy for them in so many ways. Uh, and because I'm saying like because of like that's one another aspect that AI is kind of forcing uh, there's a forced dysfunctionality, right? That like is gonna um, make it make it absolutely necessary for us to create something new and different, something that really serves the kids and serves our society in a better way. Uh, so that's my position on that.
All right. So Catalonia, you know how it's called in Spanish, correct?
Is it not Catalonia?
Catalunya in Spanish. And in
Hmm.
Catalan, it's also called Catalunya. And in Occitan, which is a language I'm not familiar with, it's called Catalonja with a HA at the end. But I have a little bit of knowledge about that area from my being in Spain at language institutes in the 1997, 1998, and then again in 2003. So that area is borders with France. And anyone who knows European history knows that there were many squabbles and battles and invasions between France and Spain fighting over whatever they wanted to fight over at the time. And Spain had a strong world presence throughout that conquistador age, and France was a big powerhouse in the a little bit after that, late 1600s, 1700s, and thereafter, when Spain had a downward trend in those years. But that area in Catalonia was an area that grew a lot of oranges and still does. And so they had that going on, and France, of course, wanted to grow their own oranges. So they had battles over the orange trade. I'm sure there are lemons and other things, limes that were grown there as well. But that's just one little example of history squabbles over something as simple as a piece of fruit, which is sustenance, and who is going to be able to control that market. And that's so interesting how people do it. And here's a simple way to look at that. If you think of you and your brothers in 1820, and you're growing up with all this pride of being a Catalonian, speaking Catalan, speaking Spanish, maybe you spoke French as well. Maybe your grandmother was French, right? And got married into your family. These types of things were common. And you grew up with all this pride, as I did growing up in the 60s and 70s. In 1976, the 200-year anniversary of the former 13 colonies, the United States, was a big prideful thing, red, white, and blue. I mean, I remember that like it was yesterday. And as a young person, men and women, my sisters as well, we were very proud to be Americans. We had, born in the USA in the early 1980s. We had the Hollywood industry, the music industry, the Olympics, just a, and the powerful military and the university system, and helping Europe in World War I and World War II. It's all kinds of powerful things in our history about being an American. And so the same thing's going on in Catalonia in the 1810s, and you and your brothers are trying to be, farmers like your father, like your uncles, and you want your oranges to be the ones that are the highest at the market and that sustain your family. So you and your brothers can have wives and kids of your own, and then you're going to put that pride of farming and workmanship and your territory into your kids, and it just keeps going on. And the same thing's happening over in France with those kids, and then eventually somebody leads you into a battle over citrus, over borders, over whatever, gold, doubloons, fighting for the sake of fighting, fighting for whatever. And that's how these little squabbles start, from the family and get organized into this big battle. And then if the person helping you trade, that person says something over to the French about how you said something nasty about the French, that can spark off this vitriol, this hatred of the French towards you. He could have even lied, that person helping you trading, just to, yeah, get his rocks off, or to start a battle and to affect the change in some way. So over to Keegan for the idea of pride and maybe adolescent behavior as grown-ups, fighting for territory and oranges and power.
Well, I I have a Libra in my birth chart in astrology, which is, you may know, is the balance, the scales, right? It's about justice, and that's so important to me. It's the ascendant sign and also the moon sign uh, is Libra, and I mentioned in 2010, right out of high school, I went over to China and I saw how just crowded it was. Like, just so different from here. Like, here it's so spacious and people are so sensitive to following the rules of the road when you're out driving on the highway. And if you get too close to somebody's space, it's a big deal. And then you go over to China and it's like, what rules of the road, right? If there's a space that can be filled, this car is going to fill it. Doesn't matter if you're supposed to be going one direction on that road or the other way. Anyway, that was how it was for when as I observed in 2010 and 2011. Um, and my sense, coming from where I come um, from my perspective, is that why does it have to be this way, where we have this country that's so overpopulated, and we have this one over that I grew up in that's like, it's underpopulated, right? It's like there's a totally different standard of living. Um, and people are attached to that discrepancy, especially if they are in the one that is, with the greater standard of living, and they want to keep it that way and maintain their advantage and have a different lifestyle, have a better lifestyle than the rest of the world. Uh, but I just think that's not just, and I have to say that, I've always felt that way. I feel that as a human being on the earth, it is our right to roam free and to choose to live wherever we would like to live. And I'm gonna stand by that um, throughout my life. I feel like nationalism as a concept is, I think it's fundamentally dysfunctional. It's fragmenting, and uh, that does. I mean, it can have some positive aspects to it, like everything. I'm not going to just say that it's just a terrible thing through and through, but fundamentally, I think that all of mankind are our brothers and sisters, and our country. When you look at it in the true sense, in the natural sense, our country is the whole world. Um, and uh, and and so when we have this level of competition because we're trying to uh, corner the market or uh, whatever it is, it's it's we have to ask ourselves, is this really what's most important in life? Right? Is it does this, can I justify my behavior uh, when I say I owe my allegiance to my family, to my country, uh, and we're gonna rally against a different family or a different country to gain advantage. Uh, I think that it's an abundantly rich world, and coming from studying permaculture and realizing the capacity that we have to increase that abundance when we partner with nature and we partner with one another, uh, we can make it work for everyone, uh, if we just have that intention, right? It's just all about having a more illuminated, more positive intention. What do you think about that, Sifu?
Yeah, the intention is a big deal. One of the things, Keegan, that I've been wrestling with and coaching people on is this idea of hyperproductivity. And I'm going to start with the idea of downtime. So downtime is incredibly important. One of the blessings that I've had with my life of not being a parent, not being a married person, is the idea of downtime every day. So even if I work a 16-hour day, I can still have downtime for half an hour or 2 hours somewhere in that mix. I tend to take a nap every day. I would say 98% of my time, I take a nap every day. The last 2 days, it's been an hour and 49 minutes exactly. I woke up at an hour and 49, the last 2 days, kind of cool. And maybe if I do that 8 out of 10 times, it'll be a really interesting neurological study. How does my body and brain know to wake up at an hour and 49 minutes? But anyway, um, the idea of downtime, which I believe successful hunting and gathering people had more often than not. If you're not fighting with marauding tribes, if you have a food and a water source and you have the weather and you're acclimated to it and it's not overwhelming you, you can have downtime. And this downtime is incredibly important. So you can go out and be hyper productive for certain periods of the day. Hallelujah. You have the energy, the wherewithal. You can find your yucca roots. You can go out on a hunt, on a gather. You can bring water and wood, whatever you're doing. Be hyper productive or very productive for a certain amount of time, and then come back and do your work of butchering, of chopping wood, whatever you're going to do, cleaning your area, and then have some downtime. Downtime could involve doing nothing, which I don't believe nothing is really nothing. Your cells are rebuilding, your mind is gathering its forces, you're getting your breathing down to a really healthful way. And then or you could be doing bead work, you could be caretaking others, you could be looking at your knee and massaging it. Like let's say you pulled a muscle or you've got some osteoarthritis or whatever, getting to know your own body, getting to know your own mind. You could be massaging someone else. That's what the you've seen in the bonobos and the chimpanzees. They do a lot of caregiving of other people. And so these are wonderful things, but this idea of hyper productivity in the workplace and in your home life, I think is a big detrimental thing because if you're not, some people will think, and the society will think, especially German, Japanese, American, for high performance culture, they're thinking that if you're not doing something that's hyper productive and very important right now, that there's a problem. And if you need time to regroup and rest and reorganize your mind, body, and spirit, then you're weak. And I don't think that's the case at all. And we'll get back to Hicks and Gracie, and I'll share an example of mind, body, and spirit relaxation that I think Hickson missed along his life of being a high performance athlete and a father and a traveling coach and mentor to other great athletes. So over to Keegan for some of his thoughts on hyper productivity and downtime.
Yeah, I mean, I have to recommend this book by Brendan Bouchard, High Performance Habits. And Sifu, it's speaking to just what you're saying, the importance of downtime, of caring for ourselves, of making it actually sustainable, right? To have a high level of performance. Like they found, and Brendan Bouchard has probably done the greatest amount of research uh, on this of anybody out there of finding what is it that truly makes a high performance lifestyle, and it's not about hitting keeping the nose to the grindstone. It's about honoring that the time necessary, the self care, prioritizing, having richness and appreciating what we have, and having positive relationships, um, and so yeah, but that's also the stuff that makes life worthwhile. Um, and we get disconnected from that, it's a downward spiral. So
Two things I'll share, Keegan. So the punchline on my why I didn't write the book Bean, the untold story of the coffee trade, is it took me 5 days of internet searching, and this is how powerful the matrix is. In 2011, I said, somebody has to have already written this book. Somebody has to have gone to Colombia and gone onto these farms with a hidden camera and a hidden microphone and recorded people who were working in this business and recorded the mold on the ships and all this type of thing. Just like the story of the bullet. Have you ever heard of the story of the bullet where they make the bullet and where it winds up far away and winds up in a war where it's killing people? Have you ever heard about the story of the bullet?
I'm not specifically the one you're talking about, I think, but I can generally get the idea.
So it's a story like that. Start with a coffee bean in Colombia, and where does it go, and what happens to it along its route, and when it gets to Starbucks in Anaheim, California, let's say. And so I knew somebody had. My intuition said somebody has to have written this. They've written Food Inc. They've written Fast Food Nation. I wrote Sedentary Nation. I think the first person who wrote the history of physicality from the hunter gatherers through the farmers, through the industrial, into the couch, but desk and car potato era. I think I was the first person that I've been able to find who did that. So I'm sort of proud. That's kind of my Mr. Holland's opus from that famous movie from the 1980s. That's kind of my Mr. Holland's opus is my book Sedentary Nation. But I knew somebody had to have written that book. But the internet search was so in my opinion, call it a CT, a conspiracy theory, or just call it a deep dive on the way things work. The bots and the algorithms kept that final book out of my realm. Even though I searched for 5 days, I did every different type of word search. I used YouTube, I used Google, I used some other searches, and I couldn't find that book. Finally, I just relaxed and I said, it's got to be in there. And I typed in the right words and I found that that book had already been written. And there's been, I found at least 50 different books on coffee, 50 different books, and at least 10 really popular ones on coffee over the last, 20 years before 2011, when I believe that's the year I was doing the search. And I read the summary of the book, and it's exactly what I would have done if I wrote that book back then. I At the time in 2011, I would have risked my life to go write that book because I was in a zone where I was willing to give it all for a study, risk my life, my livelihood, wind up being captured, tortured, or killed. I would have done it in 2011. It was not just a low point, it was a point in my life where I was determined to do something big, do something really big, which Bruce Lee and Hickson Gracie have both done in their lives. But fortunately, I didn't have to do that. Somebody had already done it. And I honored the work that that guy had already done by not writing a new book and not trying to steal any thunder or wasting 4 years of my life doing that because all the research had been done. Over to Keegan for his thoughts on this little snippet of my 2011 life.
Interesting how you said you kind of just relaxed and then it came. I think that was so often the case. Uh, I had a girlfriend that called that the law of zero. If she's which was she defined that as you're searching for something, you just stop, or if you just give up, and then it appears, right? And I've experienced that many times myself. Um, and I think also it's something that like it's an energy that it's like you're putting out this energy of need or you're like or it's like a desperation it's like I've got to I'm want and if you look at the word want it means you don't have it if you're holding that energy of that belief it's like I want to find this thing and you're not going to find it because you're holding a belief that you want it so you don't have it. So you kind of have to start with the belief that, oh, I have it. I'll just let it come. It'll just appear to me because I'm already with that. Uh, that was the most and then also just the other piece of what you're sharing is in a honor you, Sifu, for not not having to reinvent the wheel
Yeah.
being able to uh, kind of rest on the accomplishments of others, and we can all learn from that as well.
We don't need to duplicate work that's already been done for ego or for monetary reasons. It's certainly you have a limited time on this planet. Certainly, we have need for remuneration for sustainability in the material world. Sure, sure. But, I hope you PhDs, researchers, authors will honor the fact that someone's already done that work and, use that work that they've done in your speaking engagements. You could quote them in your articles and your other books, but there's really no need to duplicate work that's already been done. You can test that work, sure. Go out and test. It's find their sources, find the village that they wrote about, interview people. You can test that the work that they did was just and honorable and full of integrity and a true look that these actual people made those quotes. And famous author Jared Diamond, who's written a number of bestsellers and a really hardworking professor at UCLA. He may be a professor emeritus or retired by now, but he wrote Guns, Germs, and Steels. He wrote Collapse and many other great books. But he's been accused, and I believe rightly so, of quoting some of the people in Papua New Guinea who did not say what he's attributed them to saying, which is very strange because his stories are so captivating. Guns, Germs, and Steel is a really big, thick book, and it's full of great things. And he's lived in Papua New Guinea, a PhD type hombre who's spent a lot of time there and got to know things at a very deep level. There's no need to misquote people if he did indeed do that. So I'm not saying he is. I'm saying he's been accused, and people have looked into it have determined that he misquoted. Now I'm not saying 10% of his work is felonious, is inaccurate. But even if you misquote one person, that certainly puts a little cloud over your work. If you're doing a scientific work, you're not doing um, a work of fiction. It's certainly something that's not needed. So I would advise all of these speakers and authors to be very careful to be accurate in what they do. Over to Keegan for his thoughts on accuracy in science and in telling accurate stories about people and their lives.
Mm. Sifu, I think this is such a common thing for people that we have a pre-existing bias, and we're looking to confirm that, right? And especially within scientific circles, because the scientific establishment has accepted certain things as reality, and they're very attached to that worldview. But despite the fact, that there's a lot of new information that's being made available and new evidence that's conflicting with the existing worldview. And if you're not maintaining an openness, right, to accept new evidence and to readjust your worldview as needed, you're not really doing science. You're stuck in a dogma effectively it's a religion that's binding you. That's the meaning of the word religion is binding back, right? You're bound back. You're kind of unstuck. I mean, you're stuck within your evolutionary process of your thinking because you're not accepting the new evidence that you can find from exploring the world and
Yeah,
exploring
yeah,
life. So, uh, you know, here's to a spirit of openness, of to discovery, of being willing to shift the worldview, and so many times that can make life so much easier on us if we can just let go of those biases.
Keegan, do you know anyone who might be someone I could interview on the idea of religion and dogma and the idea of closed-mindedness to other ways of looking at things in terms of information, in terms of practices, in terms of sustainability. What I'm finding with conversations with very religious people who espouse one dogma and one book is it's common that I get a closed-minded response and almost a fear-based response to other information which may be useful in the way of examining the world and living a life.
I mean, there's a bunch of people that I follow that can recommend for sure. I mean, the first person that came to mind was Kenneth Scott, the House of Cousins. For just for the depth of research that he's done into what is the religion, that we have, and where does it come from? The ancient kind of esoteric um, foundations of the religions of the world today. Um, and going with that is with the personal belief system and the way we navigate our creatorhood, whether or not we recognize that we are creating our experience moment to moment. um,
Sustainability of brain. We talked a little bit about neurology. So here's Hickson Gracie, a guy who's on my LinkedIn page, whom I've met, and we've got our arms around each other. I had just finished surfing. He's about to start surfing in Ventura, California, which is really a great surf spot. It's Ventura County lines and the a Beach Boys song from the late 60s. And so Hickson was up there, and I was there in 2005, and he gave me a moment to take some pictures with him and share a message. Um, his famous message to me, which I still use in my coaching and in my life, and I wish I remembered it more in my life. And I didn't know at the time, but he had lost his eldest son. His eldest son died. I think his eldest son was 20 in New York, and he was missing for 3 or 4 months. And his cousins in New York uh, got a call, or somebody got a call, and they said we found a body. And so his cousins in New York went to the morgue, and they opened up the drawer, and they identified, Hickson's son, who had been missing, sort of ran away in a huff and became a model in New York, but uh, died of some sort of a drug type thing experience at age 20. And that was really hard on Hickson, who it's hard to be like a Muhammad Ali or Bruce Lee and a really normal family. It's hard to be a normal family no matter what you do if you're just a normal guy. But here's Hickson, this world famous, hardworking teacher, martial artist, traveler, and grew up in a challenging life, like I mentioned, with lots of thuggery and poverty in Brazil. And he had problems in his own family. And so here he is with two sons, and one his eldest son had some issues. So I didn't know that when I met Hickson that had happened within a few years before I met him, and he had gone into a pretty dark depression, had stopped training jujitsu for a while and sort of checked out of the planet. But he got his wherewithal to live day to day back, I believe, partially through water therapy and surfing. So when I met him, he was still in that recovery, but he was kind enough to spend a few minutes with me, who was very entrenched in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at that time. I'd been doing it since 1996, and here we were in 2005, so coming up on 10 years. And and I said to him, because I'd like to ask some people, especially a well-known philosophical martial artist, which I think if you're a really good martial artist, you tend to be a philosopher. Bruce Lee, I would say, more than a great martial artist, he was a great philosopher. Like, come along with that with a great martial artist. But philosophy is, how do you live? How do you treat others? How do you handle your training, your family, all this type of stuff? And so I said to him, I said, Hickson, what's the secret of life? And he puts his arm around me. So imagine a male lion, 180 some pounds with skinny Sifu next to him, who's exhausted from training. And this guy is the baddest hombre on the planet with a fair fight. You know, if they had an unfair fight with eye gouging and fish hooking, at the fish hooking right there where you grab somebody, and he was in those kinds of fights that were not fair on the street where you could fish hook and eye gouge, and he survived. But here he did a lot of fair, jujitsu training. And I said, "What's the secret of life?" So we got our arms around each other, and I feel like you can feel his power. It's like holding the Tasmanian devil type of a thing, because he's just wall to wall power. It's not just from physical muscle; it's internal force, muscles, breathing. You can feel it. I mean, this is the guy on the planet who could be the baddest hombre of, let's say, the late '80s and the early '90s. And I said, "What's the secret of life, Hickson?" And he says, "Enrique." My name was Henry, but it's in Spanish it's Enrique, and in Portuguese they say Enrique. He said, "Enrique, the secret of life is to be silly." And then he thought about it. He goes, "No, no, no, that's not the secret of life." He said, "The secret of life is to be silly all of the time." And then he clamped me down so I'd never forget it. He's like passing on like the wisdom of the ages to me. And I'm a silly, funny guy. Some of my interviews that doesn't always come out because I'm also trying to deal with some of the challenge of the world and help people. And it's very frustrating. So I'm not always the silly person I'd like to be. But this guy who had lost his son, who's had to fight for his life, stick up for himself, his family, his martial arts, had inter-family squabbles, over money and licensing of the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Gracie name, all kinds of challenges. He's telling me, and he's not a comedian type guy. He's just not. He's a deep guy, and he can be funny, but I'm really a comedian type guy. He's not. And he says the secret of life is to be silly all of the time, right in the middle of battling depression. I mean, man, that hits me to this day. Over to Keegan for his thoughts on this.
Yeah, Sifu. My journey with spirituality, and you could say like with philosophy, began with the martial arts. In middle school, I got into karate, and that's when I first got into a meditation practice. And it progressed. Like I said, I went and did training over in China. Um, but the thing that really got me, determined and doing a daily meditation practice was actually the story that my grandmother told me uh, of an explorer. And this was Admiral Byrd. He was in the U.S. Air Force, and he was flying over the North Pole and ended up flying inside a hole in the North Pole into the inner Earth, right? To the realm of Agartha. That's like Shambhala. It's like at a different frequency of reality. It's like entering into another dimension. And there was this other civilization inside the Earth that his plane was grabbed by a tractor beam, landed in this advanced civilization inside a city, and he met these tall beings, and they showed him around their world inside the Earth, which I say like Shambhala or like Avalon or like actually like the great big island of Mu in the Pacific. It's not that this ancient island and this ancient civilization sank. It's actually they disappeared to the reality that we are experiencing as a collective because they are at a different. This is Mu is the ancient land of perfect unconditional love, and when we in our fall in consciousness got disconnected uh, from that way of being of unconditionally loving one another, we can no longer access that place. And then as we rise again into that consciousness, we will find that we're going to access it again. But it was really through my sense of exploration and the excitement of hearing this story of Admiral Byrd, like he's in within this paradigm of working for the military, and then suddenly something about there was some opening that happened within him that he was able to access this other realm, this other dimension, and connect with these other beings, and then they sent him back to the surface of the earth with the message that we need to stop the development of nuclear weapons, which of course they didn't listen to. Um, But uh, you know, when we get into martial arts and the meaning of kung fu, right? Gong means work, fu means practice. So it's really anything that you're working and practicing. And when martial arts was my great passion in life uh, until I discovered permaculture, and then permaculture became my great sense of purpose and passion in life. I'm like, I need to be a part of this movement of returning to the indigenous wisdom of our ability and our duty to be stewards of the earth, to be in deep partnership and communion with the natural world, and to be a benefit to make the environment more abundant, more diverse, and find ourselves fulfilled within that. Right, that's actually a more fulfilling way than this comfort that we're going towards in the in the cities, disconnecting, siloing ourselves because we want air conditioning and a car that goes miles an hour, and all this stuff. But I brought the philosophy from my martial arts experience straight into the permaculture adventure, right? Of learning, like, how can I move from everything that I've learned so far in my life and transform the way that I relate with my environment to be a conscious gardener, to be planting these plants and realizing that when I take care of the earth, that she takes care of me, and when I have a prayerful communion with the plants and the animals, that we find a harmony and we can live all together and help one another and not be viewed as not be enemies towards each other any longer. Um, and that's really the the philosophy and the will, the intention, the volition to be a part of that beautiful tapestry of life, rather than to be burning the tapestry of life in order to corner a market or whatever it is, to meet a quarterly growth goal. That's based on what in reality, right? um, that's what drives my quest and my openness to be on this learning journey. And the like he was speaking about this silliness. One thing that I learned that from being at this brain conference, and I had been exposed to this previously, is that the way that we can learn the most is when we're in a state of play. And just like this light is playing across the screen here, that's who we are. This is our nature, to be in a state of joyful expression, and being in the flow, and not being attached and not being too serious, because it's an ebullient feeling of joy that is our natural state of being, right? And so when we connect with our natural state of being and we identify as that, um, then that's the secret, right? That unlocks the pathway that we're meant to follow. I'd
The
say.
power of laughter and the power of being silly. And when you're in that playful zone, like if you're in a golf tournament or just playing your normal game of golf, thanks for doing that, Keegan. If you're doing your thing, and you smile before you do it, it lightens the tension in your body. Now, it's not just any smile. It has to be a smile that encapsulates and travels to all recesses of your body. But if you can master that, just like Hickson mastered breathing, 4 different types of breath that he could call on, one's for energy, one's for relaxation, one's for maintenance of energy, and not non-exhaustion, one relaxation. There's 4 or 5 different breaths that he mastered, and that yoga talks about those ujjayi breathing, different types of breathing, and it can do things to allow your neurology and your neuromuscular system to perform at its optimum level. So that smile is a way to initiate that. Here's something I wanted to read. It's about Parkinson's. Parkinson's disease happens when dopamine producing neurons in the brain, called substantia nigra, NIGRA, gradually die or stop functioning properly. Dopamine is essential for smooth, coordinated movement. Neurodegeneration, loss of dopamine neurons, Lewy, Wely, Lewy or Lewy bodies, abnormal protein clumps, alpha synuclein found in brain cells. 5 to 10% of the cases are linked to inherited gene mutations. Most cases are not inherited. Long-term exposure to certain pesticides, herbicides, or industrial chemicals. Aging. Risk increases significantly after age 60. Then you also have the pugilistic Parkinson's, which is concussions and repetitive concussions. And concussions hit again when you haven't healed. Or if you have a concussion, you go out and you do a lot of movement, gymnastics, running, fast car racing, this type of thing. And the motor symptoms are tremors, slowness of movement called bradykinesia, difficulty initiating movement, shuffling, walk, muscle rigidity, stiff arms, legs, and necks, postural instability, reduced facial expression called masked face, monotone speech, smaller handwriting, etc. And then there's sleep disorders, constipation, loss of smell, fatigue, depression, anxiety, all kinds of other symptoms, low blood pressure on standing, urinary problems, sexual dysfunction. So unfortunately, my great mentor, Hickson Gracie, is suffering from pugilistic Parkinson's. He's had that for a handful of years right now. Before that, he had lots of lumbar and cervical issues in his spine. And he's had a rough go the last few years, besides the rough go of his entire life. And when his eldest son passed away through a harmful lifestyle situation. So that's what Hickson's going through now. And if I had to say something, I would say, on the one hand, you got two hands. On the one hand, he's advanced his art. He was walking around Rio de Janeiro called Rio, and he was always ready to protect himself and to withstand any challenge at any time, which was similar to what Harry Houdini did with the punches to the gut. He said, anytime, any place you want to punch me in the gut, if I can't handle it, you make this much money. If I can handle it, you have to pay me this much money. If that's the true story, I don't know. But Hickson was always ready for a challenge. He always took those challenges and he fought basically to the death. People, if they didn't give up, they'd be fighting to the death, but they would often give up or be incapacitated and he wouldn't punch them until they died. But he would have, if it was a warfare type situation with five people ganging up on him, there would have been fights to the death if those people kept coming, uh, or until they were incapacitated. So that's Hickson. He did his thing on the one hand. On the other hand, if he had more balance in his life, where he would have more recovery from his injuries, less challenges, less getting thrown to the ground when he wasn't fully recovered with neurological trauma, maybe he wouldn't have suffered from the pugilistic Parkinson's that he's suffering from now. Over to Keegan for his thoughts on some of this type of trauma.
It makes me think, Sifu, about whatever what how would it be different if he were trained in Aikido, right? Uh, rather than having this challenge, let's go at it physically right away, right? Aikido is the art of harmony, right? So it's like I can come at people that are coming to you in a confrontational way and turn it into harmony, right? The martial arts isn't simply about physicality. It's also about how we interact, how we strategize in order to to pacify, right? And we don't have to beat somebody to being like to incapacitance in order to subdue them. We can actually subdue people by by showing them uh, by showing them love, by showing them grace, by bringing a distraction. There's this story of an Aikido master on the subway that got an aggressor to stop his aggression by asking about his wife, um, and things like this. Um, so just I mean I'm hopefully we go into a more peaceful direction in general. That's my prayer, and that's how I am going to be looking forward to interacting with people going forward for
Do you know what,
2026.
Keegan, do you know what the word jujitsu means?
What does it mean?
The gentle art or the soft art?
Ah,
Because you're not punching people in modern jujitsu. You are subduing them, and they are tapping out. There's three ways. You pass out from asphyxiation, you tap out, touching someone twice, or you say stop, or I give up, or tap. Those are the ways that jujitsu, the combat ends in the modern form, which is not fighting to the death. The ancient form is one-on-one combat, fight to the death, from ancient Japan. Uh, and that's jujitsu. But the idea is the gentle art, and that means, using leg locks, chokes, body cranks, knee bars, arm bars, etc., and outdoing people in that way, and in a gentle way, without breaking their nose, without um, smashing your knee into their face. But when you take jujitsu and you move into a fight or an MMA situation, you use the rules of the street or the MMA rules or the pancrase rules, what have you. But jujitsu is just one of those arts that is useful to know in many aspects in life. I like it because it's like two lion cubs rolling around in a playful way. That's the part that I like. You can do it blindfold, you can feel it, it's very intuitive. And there is memorization, sure, but there's also a lot of feel. And so that's the thing that I gravitated to. But I've done many of the other martial arts that you have. I've done Taekwondo, I've done Kali, Eskrima, I've done American boxing, I've done American wrestling, I've done not capoeira, but I've taken a class in capoeira. That was quite interesting. Um, what else have I done? Lots of yoga and Tai Chi, which, if anyone doesn't know that Tai Chi is a martial art, I'll give you a quick story. My instructor in Spain, who was good at everything, he's one of those people who studied everything and he learned it, very quick learner. He said, "Oh, you don't think Tai Chi is a martial art? Okay, watch this." So I'm with him in a ring and he does a Tai Chi move and he grabs me in the chest with fingertip to compression of the palm pressure, and he lifts me up into the air and launches me 6 feet into the air. I'm 170 pounds at the time. He's about the same. He's shorter than I am. And with his beautiful ballet move, he launched me in the air. And amazingly, he did it so perfectly that I landed on my feet 5.5, 6 feet away across the ring. And I said, if he wanted to, he could have thrown me out of the ring onto the concrete floor, but he didn't do that. But that certainly would have impacted me in many more ways. But I got enough of his launch onto the padded martial arts boxing ring that he had to realize that Tai Chi was indeed a martial art. But I had never known that until that time. And I was new in my Tai Chi experience at that time. Over to Keegan for his thoughts on getting launched.
Well, Sifu, I want to go back to what you were saying about Parkinson's because I had this idea while you were sharing that dopamine, right? Dopamine is the motivation chemical, right? Um, and you said it comes from this substantia nigra, which sounds like to me that sounds like a black substance, right? And so just when I was just contemplating that idea for a second because um, we can what we can really draw motivation from is this darkness, like the like being willing to face the shadow of who we are, or like the negative consequences are what's kicking us in the butt. Right, like we've been mentioning about a couple of things. I mean, mentioned COVID and various like the AI, right? Things like potentials, pot- um, potentials that are going to be hellish for us to go through, right? Those are the things which are motivating us um, to to make it not that way, right? To make a positive outcome happen, uh, and so that's just a thought I wanted to share to speak on, um, the importance of going into that. I don't know if like the sustancia nigra, if that's actually what the meaning of that. But to me, it makes perfect sense that we would need to go into the darkness to receive. That's like the source of our motivation, just like we come from the womb. The darkness is the source of our vitality and the things that are moving life forward. And life is movement. One of the things I learned at this conference that being sedentary uh, is actually a diseased state. Right? I never heard that said explicitly, but like anytime you're just sitting still for more than 45 minutes, um, you, you're actually bringing harm to yourself by doing that. And then maybe you can transcend that if you're sitting and meditating. But it's definitely good to incorporate some movement.
I'm going to challenge Sifu Keegan to read Sifu Slim, Sedentary Nation. I put 4 years into it. I read the book during the editing phase 110 times. Can you imagine that? An almost 300-page book. I read it 110 times in about a 2.5 year period. I said, this is my first big nonfiction book. Um, I have to get this right. And so, how am I going to do that? Well, I handed it to other people who were more gifted than I was in many areas, and I had them edit it, and I paid them for it, and they gave it back to me, and they said, do this. And they gave me a whole list of things to do. And I did that. And while I was doing that, I kept reading it over and over because I wanted the English and I wanted it to be a page turning book. I wanted each sentence, each word to fit appropriately and have this is before you could use AI. And I wanted to do it right. And so I kept, and I probably had 5 different people who were 3 professional editors and 2 really good, smart people to read it. And I kept using their things and rewriting it. So then I finally released it. And the same year I released Sedentary Nation, a famous professor who's called the Barefoot Professor from Harvard, Daniel Lieberman, he released his book, The Story of the Human Body, I think it was. It was released at the same time. And I didn't know about what he was going to write. I had only watched 2 of his videos before that, and I'd never read any of his books. But here's this evolutionary biologist from Harvard who's a few years younger than I am, who's really an expert on the hunting and gathering people and a really fun guy at Harvard. And he wrote a book that's very similar to Sedentary Nation, and we both released it at the same time. But I'm very proud of that work. But I'd like to hear your thoughts, and I'd like to hear if it even helps you in your walk know the history of physicality, the sociology, the psychology, and all that stuff. And there's also a wellness guide in that book. But I even talk about elevators and what they were used for and what their purpose was. And so that's something I'd love to see what your thoughts are. And now over to your substantia nigra from Latin. Substance, of course, substantia or material, nigra, black or dark. So substantia nigra literally means, as Keegan had considered, black substance. It appears darkly pigmented in the midbrain when viewed during dissection. The dark color comes from neuromelanin, a pigment that accumulates in dopamine producing neurons. The pigmentation increases with age and is especially prominent in healthy adults. So there's a little bit of that from ChatGPT. Over to Keegan for his final words.
Well, thank you for recommending your book. I look forward to checking that out. Absolutely, and that's good confirmation about the black substance. I spent the last year, almost a year, in Montenegro, the Black Mountain, uh, and so I'm feeling very motivated.
So how do we get a hold of Keegan if people on the internet want to find out more about you? What are the sources you would list?
Yeah, I know. I mentioned this like um like the Instagram that I created has the first three letters of my first name and the first three letters of my last name. So that's Keemea. My Anatole is my middle name. My last name is Mead, and so I didn't realize this at the time, but that actually is a Hawaiian word. I was living in Hawaii at the time, and my friend who's Hawaiian culturalist, he teaches about Hawaiian culture. Uh, he said that means comedy. And you may notice like the way I speak, I kind of I'll jump around and will draw connections between things that you may not even be able to follow it sometimes. And I do that on purpose. I want to share a different perspective. And if we break down the etymology of that Hawaiian word, ke'e mea, which means comedy, ke'e means something and mea means different. So it's just something different. Like we have that classic Monty Python movie, and now for something completely different. And that's what I'm motivated to do is bring something new, different perspective. You can check out that Instagram. I don't post there too much. I also have a YouTube channel which is called Law of the Earth, and those are acronyms: Law and Earth. Law standing for Learning Adventures Worldwide, and Earth standing for Exploring Authority, Relationships, Traditions, and Hearts. Uh, and so I also have a website which is integratefullness.site with the words great and the word full in there. So if it's like integrate fullness, that's my movement that I'm excited to share.
Fantastic. The wind down on Hickson Gracie, spelled Rickson, Rickson, but it's pronounced Hickson in Portuguese. I would say that he can be a mentor to many people because we all deal with challenges, and he had a significant amount of challenges in his life. Plus, he had the modern version of jujitsu for self-defense, for fair competitions, for life, for philosophy, for testing it. He was one of the people who tested it in different ways and adapted it. That's really the thing that I got from Bruce more than anything. And my instructor in Spain, the man who launched me, he said Bruce's his favorite quote, and he studied Jeet Kune Do, the Bruce Lee's martial art. He's the number one guy in Spain on that subject historically. He's written a book on it, and he's met. He got his martial arts certificates in Jeet Kune Do under Daniel Inosanto, who was Bruce Lee's close friend, who taught Bruce Lee nunchucks and Kali Eskrima, and down in Los Angeles. Uh, he and so he learned from him, but he said he asked us in martial arts. This is back in 1997 when I was living in Benalmádena, where his martial arts school is. His name is Michael Andalus, and he said, what do you get from Bruce Lee?" And we all said what we thought we got from Bruce Lee, and he kept asking us that over the course of a week or two. And he says, "Here's what I got from Bruce Lee." He said, "The secret of life and the secret of Jeet Kune Do is the same thing. It's adaptability." And
Mm.
that's what you have to do in life is you have to adapt. Keegan and I, we go on a trip. We're going to figure out how we can be useful to each other. This is Sifu skills. This is Sifu Keegan skills. And this is our energy level, that particular moment. This is what we're feeling. And we adapt and we help each other get through that journey, and we crack each other up. And then we pull back when the other person's overwhelmed by our comedy. We pull back. We take a walk away from each other. We do all these things to adapt to making that little journey that we're on together functional. So that's what I'll wind down with. If you have any final words, we'll hear your final words, Keegan.
Oh, well, you asked me earlier about my great heroes, and I mentioned Jackie Chan, but Bruce Lee is definitely in there as well. I remember when I first took ayahuasca, uh, that was quite the spiritual awakening, and who was there with me as a support, as a guide, was Bruce Lee. And when I think of him, the first thing I think of is be water, right? And this consciousness of water and its ability to flow and to take on the adaptability, to conform to whatever shape of the container that it's in, to flow and to crash. Uh, this is the quality that is life itself. When they say water is life, and water is the reason that we are alive. We are mostly water. May we flow on in an abundant, beautiful um, flow and hold the vibration as we know water does, as a great substance of memory and a medium for communication. We can, as the elephants communicate, and the whales, great, tremendous distances to one another through the water. Uh, and so let's be communicative in that way and connected and fluid and abundant.
I'm going to wind us down with a song that I've used in my coaching and my mentoring of other people. And it's Journey from, I believe, 1981. Don't Stop Believing. So let's listen to this and it'll wind us down. And I'm Sifu Slim at sifuslim.com. Please reach out if you have other people who wish to share a conversation with me or need some fitness, wellness, life coaching, learning about intuition, karma, fear-based living versus happiness and openness, open heart, open mind, all that stuff. Author of several books. You can see them all on sifuslim.com. And I'll wind us down. Keegan, thanks so much. Aloha to you and mahalo. Always great to connect with kind of my younger Sifu, kind of a younger brother type guy who I guess in our relationship, I'm kind of proud of the guy that you keep turning out to be. Each time we meet, I learn about you and I learn about your path and I feel like an older brother and I'm proud of the younger brother. So congratulations at always impressing me with your openness, kindness, and your competence in what you're doing and your ability to learn new things. So really proud of you.
Thank you so much, Sifu. Really appreciate you as well. Lots of love.
Don't stop believing, people. Big aloha from wherever you are, from wherever I am to wherever you are. Peace be with you, mind, body, and spirit. Aloha.